Hello, BookTube. I've been meaning to talk about my writing for a couple of weeks now. And Steve Donahue's recent video, which I will link in the show notes down below, was the perfect kick in the rear end to finally make this video, assuming I don't fall into my discussion video trap, which I already sort of have because this is the third or fourth attempt at making this video. But anyway, so my plan for this video is to talk about my writing and some of my problems with it. But first, I need to set the parameters, the context of what I'm going to talk about. So this video is going to only talk about fiction. And by fiction, I mean not just novels or shorter works like novellas and short stories, but also comics. You see behind me, I have a collection of several hundred volumes of manga, which are Japanese comic books. And I've been interested in manga for a long time, although it's just been a few years since I started my new manga collection. But um, I've but manga has always inspired me to want to try my hand at comics. And that desire is probably a bit more than my desire to write novels or shorter works of prose fiction. Um, and particularly the three projects that I'm really most passionate about, particularly the one that I've been working on for quite a while now, I have them conceptualized as comic books, although there are certain issues with um, writing them, conceptualizing them, and writing them as comic books, which I will get to later on. But that's not to say that I don't want to write novels or shorter works. I do have a plethora of ideas that I have that are at the moment conceptualized as novels or shorter works. Like I said, is also one of my many problems is that I do have a lot of ideas, a lot, and trying to settle on any one to work until I finish is one of my recurring problems that I need to sort of work out. But so, what do I want to write? What are the stories I want to tell? Um, I am, by and large, almost exclusively inspired creatively to want to write fantasy. Science fiction and fantasy has been for a very long time my favorite genre of fiction. Although, if you've been following along with my channel for any length of time, you will know that I've had my issues with science fiction and fantasy the last few years, and even longer with literary fiction, which I actually do want to try my hand at some more realistic or literary novels. Because I have about 3 ideas for that, maybe 4. Um, although actually trying to figure out a plot is a lot harder, given like where those stories come from. It's like yeah. But anyway, um, but yeah. So I mostly want to write science fiction and fantasy. Okay, fantasy. I always say science fiction and fantasy, but I mostly mean fantasy. I mean, it's like with whenever I read history, whether I love the work of history or hate it, um, as much as I enjoy it for itself, I also really love reading history because no work of history goes by that I do not come up with some idea for a fantasy, either to add to an idea I already have or a completely new idea. And that is a lot of the fun, actually, of my newfound love or my deepening love of history. Um, So that's basically to recap. Um, in addition to wanting to write novels and short stories, I also want to write comics, and there are three projects I have, particularly one that is the one that I'm really focusing a lot of my energy on, that I have conceptualized as comics. Now, moving on to that particular project, it is Scorpius, my superhero project. So I think the last time I updated on my progress, I think I mentioned that I had written the draft, or less charitably, an outline for the first 36 chapters of the series. And I've been stymied since, largely because I'm not entirely sure how detailed I should be in writing a comic book script, but also, as much as I want to try my hand at writing comics, there are problems with doing that, because while I guess it would be okay if once I completed the script on that rough draft and typed out a symbolic "the end" at the end, and then put it in a trunk and never looked at it again, I guess it's finishing the project in one way, but it never would feel finished. There'd be something missing. And that um, kind of makes me want to really question whether or not I really it's like, obviously I'm in a bit of a conundrum here. um, and so there are really two problems I have, possibly a third, but I think that third one is more further down the line. So for one thing, a comic book needs art to help tell the story, and I do not have those skills. I'm an okay beginner, or I'm a decent beginner pastelist. If I worked at it a lot more than I do, I probably would get much better, particularly in regards to landscaping. Now, whether or not I'd ever be able to do portraits or more man-made or human-constructed um, buildings and objects, I don't know. But I've always been rather weak at drawing, whether realistic or on the sort of fine arts level or in an illustrative sense. So, and I don't really have the time to try to get better, because that would take hundreds of hours of practice to get better. And I don't have enough time in the day, particularly with other things I want to do, whether it's reading or writing or cooking or what have you. So there's that. There's also the fact that I don't have the money to hire an artist, and also whether or not I even would really want to collaborate with an artist to help me realize my vision, because I don't necessarily enjoy working with people. So with that in mind, I really need to transition and accept that I need to transition these three projects I have that I've conceptualized as comic books into novels. And particularly with Scorpius, I'm at a bit of a conundrum because I don't know how to do it. I mean, I guess what I could do is try to look at those first 36 chapters, figure out what is the story arc, focus on that, and cut the fat. Cut extraneous arcs and what have you. And that could work. And also I think really rethinking what is it I want to say about this story. Because I do recognize that the world I'm creating is not quite the one I want to create. Because the thing about superhero comics is that there's a conflict, I guess you could say, between well, no. So basically, if you watch Steve Donahue and Michael K. Vaughan's comic book videos, which usually go up on Wednesdays, a few weeks ago, or even more of like a month or maybe even longer than a month ago now, Steve and Michael K. Vaughan were talking about what Steve Donahue calls the Stan Lee virus, which was an innovation in American superhero comics in which the narrative progresses rather than each adventure, each issue being its own self-contained story with very little in the way of a continuing narrative. I mean, certain villains, certain supporting cast members, once introduced, probably would recur, but for the most part, the events that happen in that story would not affect the story going forward. Stan Lee changed that. Basically, in the Marvel age of comics, you have, like, take Spider-Man. Peter Parker starts his career as Spider-Man at 16. And in 1963. In 2023, Peter Parker is in his late 20s, early 30s. He's graduated high school. He's gone off to college. He's gotten a bachelor's, probably a master's, if not a PhD as well. He's worked at the Daily Bugle. He's been a teacher. He's been a businessman. He's kind of sort of at points been a professional superhero. He's had relationships with several romantic relationships. He's been married once. That was annoyingly canceled or retconned. So, yeah. So that's, in a nutshell, the Stan Lee virus, which has its issues because, of course, to a certain extent, the world can't progress that far because the idea is the world outside your window. Well, if keeping with Marvel, and I mean, okay, neglecting the 60s origins of most of this and sort of go, okay, roughly 20 years ago. So, say superheroes first emerged in 2003. Then, so basically 2023 and 2003 in both Marvel and this Earth, things were practically the same. But then by 2023, Marvel Earth should be radically different because all of the shenanigans that have gone on, all of the super science that's been developed, that world should really be far, far, far more advanced, far, far different than our world is. And yet, it's still very much the same. That these advances have not really changed the world as much as they should have. And my own project has kind of fallen into that trap, even though my idea was that this world, this version, that my setting would have had superheroes for far longer, into the late 30s or so. So, like practically almost a century of superheroics and supervillains and super science and all of that, it should be really radically different. And yet I never really did that. So, so that is, I think, one thing that maybe, I don't know. I was thinking, I'm not entirely sure where I went with that tangent, but except for, I guess, that in a way, a response to both Michael K. Vaughan and Steve Donahue's Stan Lee virus videos, and that myself personally, I don't think it goes far enough. That I think it should go as far as it can and not really be sort of any sort of artificial status quo blocks. But anyway, but yeah, so I've been stymied the last few months with trying to convince myself and accept the fact that as much as I want Scorpius to be a comic book, it has to be a novel. And trying and deciding, okay, well, how do I do this? Now, I think one thing could be, I could try to do like an epic fantasy, as much as, I mean, superhero setting is not actually a constant multi-level or multi-vector, epic events going on at the same time. I mean, the one thing about, like, well, where was everybody when Galactus first showed up? Well, they were probably all dealing with several epic level threats themselves. So they were all busy because it's like you have Galactus doing something over here, you have Magneto doing something over there, you have Doc Ock and the Green Goblin doing something else over there. It's, yeah. So, I mean, there's something I could do for that, or try to maybe a secondary world or something and just try to come up with something that necessarily doesn't need that continuing narrative. What I do know, what I don't want to do is a novel an arc, because that really annoys me. I've looked at a number of examples of superhero prose fiction, and I almost universally dislike them. So, yeah, I don't know. Um, so, yeah. So, as an update for my writing, I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to work things out. Right now, I'm in the process of trying to figure out where I want to go. Although, I guess this video has been quite helpful in that I actually do have a direction where I want to go, which is just, okay, it's roughly 2023 Earth with nearly a century's worth of superheroics and all the changes that would entail. And just go from there and see where it goes. So I think I might do that. Now, I think part of Steve's video, I think, was also trying to figure out or trying to construct an author tube through BookTube. And I don't know necessarily. I mean, I like the idea of an author group or writers group sort of organized through BookTube. I think that's actually a neat idea. And hopefully something like it or similar could be worked out. For those on BookTube, whether we make BookTube videos or are generally limited to just commenting and interacting through the comments, could be cool and could be interesting and might actually help a number of aspiring writers to um, finish their project or to help out if there are particular issues they're having. I mean, myself included, because I do have a number of issues, namely one, settling on a project, and sort of keeping my interest, particularly in the slog parts of world building and writing. So that's about all I have for this video. I'm quite pleased that I actually managed to make it, given how difficult I find making discussion videos and writing discussion videos. Hopefully this video made sense. And if it didn't, my apologies. I will be back tomorrow with a tag video. Hopefully it won't be the last tag video. And I'll talk a lot about that tomorrow when I do that particular tag video. And then on Friday, I will do weekly reads. So anyway, BookTube, until I see you next time, thank you. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.